somewhat prepared. If we needed to pull up a slide, I have slides available, but we can also just do the organic thing, just based on what you think, would be most valuable.
I'll tell you. So I think so. We're live right now.
Okay.
We're live on Facebook. I wonder if you see the same thing I do. So in the top of my screen, I see like little icons for different social media things.
I
Do you
don't.
have
I
those
just see
also?
it says live, and it's
Okay.
counting. Yeah, 30 seconds
Yeah,
live.
exactly. So I think you should be counting up for how long we've been live. Yeah, that's what it's doing. Um, there's a setting which allows you to share it to your social media also, but
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how to. Um, Up until now, I've been doing solo lives, and they've been anywhere from 15 minutes to like an hour. And I've
Mm-hmm.
always wanted to do the Joe Rogan thing. If you listen to
Yeah.
Joe Rogan, he'll talk to his guest as long as there's something to talk about. He'll
Mm-hmm.
he'll get into it. He'll talk about what he finds interesting. He'll talk about what his guest finds interesting, and it just goes. And it's always a good listen. So
Uh-huh. Yeah.
that's sort of the model that I want to emulate. I'm
Uh-huh.
pretty sure that anybody who's listening to either of us is they have an idea of what they're in for, and they sort of will be comfortable listening as time fits. So it should be fine either way.
Yeah, I'm game.
All right, cool. So let's whoever heard the first few words, we can start off with the official hello. All right, hello internet. Thanks for joining me after, what is it, a 4-month hiatus, something like that. I basically dropped off. Chelsea, if you didn't realize, I was doing lives for about 3 months straight. And then mid-January, after I was very proud of myself for making it past the new year, I
Yeah.
immediately fell off, and now it's 4.5 months later.
So you did the reverse.
Exactly. I patted myself on the back and immediately fell off. So,
Yeah.
and I've been like, I should restart. I should restart. Friends will tell me, "Hey, I liked stopping in and seeing what you had to say."
Mm-hmm.
So I always knew I had things to say. I always knew I had things to talk about, but finding the right moment was sort of tough.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden, I made that viral post on LinkedIn,
Uh-huh.
and you happened to say, "Let's talk about it," and I'm like,
Mm.
"Oh, yes, let's talk about it."
Yes.
And
Yeah.
and
Hot.
even then it took a couple of weeks to schedule between
Yeah.
all of the things that you're busy with and all of the things that I'm busy with, but we finally made it happen. So
We did. Yeah.
I'll pat myself on the back. I'll give you a big thank you for finding the time to join. I'll tell you, you have the honor of being my first live guest. So
Awesome. That's great.
everybody else, every other time has been just me. So you have an honor, and you also have something to live up to in terms of being interesting and lively. But I think you have that handled.
Good. Good. Yeah. That's a title that no one can take away because it's the first.
No, you will always be the first. You will always be the first.
Yeah.
Like, I actually had a random other first a few months ago that probably nobody is going to beat for maybe a couple of decades. So Newark redid one of their terminals. Like, they just rebuilt it top to bottom. It's one of those like $100 million projects.
Yeah.
And I randomly happened to be on the first plane that took off. It was a 5:50 a.m. flight the first day. And I made sure to look at the board and see that nothing else was taking off.
Uh-huh.
And it turns out I was the first.
Wow.
So to be on the first plane leaving out of a new terminal, for me, it was mildly interesting. For people who are airplane people, I have to imagine that that's like a super big deal.
Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah, so you get to be the first here. It's not quite the same, but it's also pretty cool.
I think it's better. I think it's better.
Yeah. So should we start off with the highs and hellos for anybody that knows just one of us?
Sure. Yeah. Do you want me to start?
Sure. Ladies first.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm Chelsea Cohen. I am the co-founder of SoStocked. SoStocked was acquired by Carbon6 about 2 years ago. And I started selling on Amazon in 2014, realized that inventory mismanagement was ruining my business. And so that's where SoStock came about. It is an inventory management software. And more we've been getting into the fee structures that tie into inventory management. Most fees tie into inventory management, all storage fees, low inventory fees, all of those things. That really, inventory is a means to an end. It's, be profitable, don't run out of stock and don't overstock. And so over the past year and a half, I've become a fees expert because, for one, it's very impactful to what we do. And for two, not a lot of people want to do it. So that's me.
No, I can imagine. I I've never been a detailed person when it comes to the numbers. So
Mm-hmm.
just the thought of you having to dive into numbers when you never have, um, it's funny. Whenever I go live, I always get super nervous before. I have an absolute terror of freezing up. I have an absolute terror of forgetting the thing that I know very well. And
Yeah.
when we compound it with talking about numbers today, I was like double as worried. I'm like, oh my God, what if you're expecting me to talk about the numbers? Or what if, what if I'm expected to do some math today? I didn't know what was coming and I didn't know how to process it. But
Yeah.
I think we'll be all right today. It's definitely interesting how Amazon changed. For me, it's funny because the whole reason I'm talking about this is because it's everything I see in my business social media. And it's something a lot of my advertising clients are talking to me about. They
Mm-hmm.
all of a sudden see their shipping rates go up. And I'm one of the few people they can talk to about the insides of their business. And
Yeah.
everybody wants to know how to handle these fees.
Mm-hmm.
There, to the best of my knowledge, there hasn't been a great answer, although hopefully we will get to some good answers today and how to manage these things.
Yeah.
And it's really been a big change. Until the end of last year, Amazon spent a good 18 months making very frequent changes to their ad platform. Every couple of weeks, there was a new feature. Every couple of weeks, there was a new piece of information they gave us that advertisers never had before. And we were almost like kids in a candy store where half of it was exciting, half of it we didn't even exactly know what to do with, and we were learning it on the fly. And it kept changing.
Mm-hmm.
And we were always wondering, are these people even testing these features before they roll them out?
Probably
For the
not.
for the yeah, my standard default is to sit on the sidelines until a feature has been running for a while.
Mm-hmm.
I basically want to see if it's broken. I want to see if it's going to mess up an account. I want to see if it's going to work as expected.
Mm-hmm.
And I say, the flip side of it is I might lose a little bit of first mover advantage, but more often than not, it doesn't hurt performance to wait that little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And you're taking time away from other areas that are lucrative.
Yeah, listen, when it comes to the ads at least, there are so many details and so many things to do in an account
Mm-hmm.
that worrying about this new extra feature that might give me 1% extra business, I'd rather keep the foundation and the essentials buttoned up effectively. And that's
Mm-hmm.
tough enough on its own.
Yeah.
But what I've been seeing is, believe it or not, ads have been running generally smoothly. No weird things are happening where all of a sudden accounts fly off the rails. No weird things are happening where features don't work as expected.
Mm-hmm.
Generally, things have been all right, but the chaos is on the other side. So the things that were always steady, sending in merchandise to Amazon was always a plain thing that could be done without much thought.
Mm-hmm.
Put your products in a package or get them ready to go on a truck, create a label with your Amazon or your software of choice, and it's generally going to be the end of it.
Mm-hmm.
You might have a little bit of aggravation waiting for the merchandise to get checked in or get lost or something like that, but that didn't really have to do with the goods leaving you. What's changing now is exactly the opposite's happened. Now, even before you make the first sale, people are logging into Amazon, and all of a sudden, instead of just shipping things for a few dollars for a shipment or a few cents per piece, now all of a sudden they're being presented with choose your extra fee of choice. So either you're going to pay this much on top of the shipping, or you're going to pay that much on top of the shipping, or you even have a triple as high price for the third option of shipping. And
Yep.
it's been making people crazy. But as I understand, this is your area of expertise.
Yeah, yeah, and the inbound shipping, that's a tough one because you don't have a lot of control over it. There are loopholes that we have found don't actually work. So anyone who is using those loopholes needs to know the loopholes in terms of, you say, I'm sending Amazon optimized, to 4 different locations, and then you cancel, 3 of those and you send to 1 location. You say, that's the loophole. However, Amazon already knows about these things. And so they're going to charge you based on where you send. Even if you created a shipment under Amazon optimized, which means no fee, if you send to 1 location, they're billing you at 1 location. But they're also taking those other 3 shipments and giving you shipment defect fees. So it's going to cost you more in the long run to try to kind of get around those things.
So basically, yes, you'll pay less because you ship to 1, but you're going to lose it on the other side because Amazon is penalizing you for doing that thing.
Yeah. So if you're shipping to 1 and that makes sense because of what you're saving on the carrier side, then that's fine. But just go straight for selecting that so that you can avoid the shipment defect, because you're going to pay the same amount either way.
So I get that. Let me ask you something which maybe reveals how naive I am, or how long it's been since I sold anything. Mm-hmm. So for those who don't know my whole story, basically from 1991 until 2018, I sold products. I sold them through telephones. I sold them through the internet, Amazon, Google, Yahoo stores, eBay, you name the platform, I've sold tons on it. And we actually used to have to deal with split shipments from Amazon being an annoying thing, even in 2016, 2017. Mm-hmm. What we used to do was essentially the simplest hack. And I'm wondering if this still works. Basically, what we would do is when we're entering the case quantities, we would just say that however much we want to send, that's 1 case. And Amazon doesn't like you breaking cases. So we would say, okay, this is a case of 300. It's not really a case of 300, but you send in 300 in 1 shipping. It's a 1 SKU shipment, and you keep it simple without having any headache. Is that still something which is doable? Is it still something which will, if it's doable, will that actually save you anything?
So I haven't heard of that specifically. I do know that the units per carton is maxed out at 150. So you would have to say at 150.
Right. It was maxed out, I think, at 150 back then also. Mm-hmm. So we would say it's a carton of 150. Mm-hmm. But cartons of 150 are better than cartons of 15.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That could be possible still. Another thing, I don't know if you know James McConnell Jr.
I know him very well. Yes, yeah. we do a little bit of work together, and he is. I have been watching from the sides as he gradually loses his mind diving into the numbers.
Yep, yeah. So I was talking to him, and these, one of these people who, when they start talking, you feel stupid. He's so smart. But one of the things he talked about was SKU locking. So I found that interesting. We were talking about it about 6 months ago. So with this new inbound placement, I'm not sure how much this is, factored in, but he was able to find that there are certain ASINs that get locked to specific locations, to specific warehouses. And he did some tests to figure out, what ASINs are locked. So if you see that you're going to the same location over and over again, he found that as long as that ASIN was in the shipment, everything would go there because that ASIN was locked. So he would put a bunch of other ASINs in that same, shipping plan, and everything would go to that one location. So,
right. So basically, if somebody has a location that's close to them in their state, and they figure out that some SKU in Amazon's catalog goes there. Basically, you don't even like, it doesn't even have to be a SKU you care about.
Yeah.
Just include a couple of them, even if you lose money, just to trigger the whole shipment to go to that place.
Yeah. Yep. That's the idea.
That's so interesting. I
Yeah.
mean, the thinking behind it is pretty straightforward. Oh, I wonder if we should have said this out loud, and if somebody from
I mean,
Amazon is going to listen to it and ruin it.
it sounds easy enough, but the amount of time you have to take to actually figure that out is, you got to be someone who's, quite.
I feel like a lot of those things might come with shipping many packages.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if you ship, it's one thing if you're shipping out of your garage and you're shipping once a week. It's different when every day you're shipping 10 pallets or 50 pallets and you're shipping them all over the country, and everything has a story. So you might have merchandise that goes to one specific location. I know that for some of my jewelry clients, there's only a couple of warehouses in Amazon system that handle high value goods because they be locked up in their own cages. So I know about that from that, and I know that meltables are a story, and I know a few of the things, but I have to imagine that if you live in it, you'll come across different things like that. It's not so much testing with imagination as it is just coming up with things.
Yeah, and noticing patterns. So, these types of hacks aren't necessarily hacks, because it takes a specific type of person, and to your point, that is immersed in these types of things to be able to recognize those patterns, because it does seem very random how Amazon decides these things.
I got to tell you, I think almost all hacks are like that. Lots of these hacks come from trial and error. And what ends up happening is the people who sell the most come across these, and either you have the personality where you keep those to yourself and make your money, or you have the personality where you give back and pay it forward to the world around you. And that's where hacks get revealed to the world. I really feel like with all of the people that I know on Amazon, that there's really only one person who understands Amazon enough to figure out things without tons of trial and error. And that person is definitely Kevin King. I've been around him enough. I've heard him talk about things, and he's almost like a watchmaker, in which he can look at Amazon like a watchmaker looks at a watch, and he understands how the gears fit together. He understands how the springs push things around, and winding causes one thing to happen. And he understands how all these pieces fit and how to make changes that work for him to make the things work better. Most other people are generally just like bludgeoning the system until they get what they want out of it.
Yeah.
So it's pretty interesting how he does it. So it sounds almost like when it comes to inbound shipping that there isn't a magic formula, or is there?
So with inbound shipping, there isn't.
So let me interrupt first. Could you take a step back and just, I see we have a few dozen people, which is nice. Could you take one step back, and for people who don't exactly understand what the options mean, could you walk us through those three options? Because I know that there are three. I know that they each are called a thing, but I mean, I don't know exactly what they mean because I don't live in the shipping, but I will bet that there are a ton of people that ship all day long that don't know what those three things mean and are just picking a number from the three.
Yep. Yeah. So there is the first one is the preferred. It's sending inventory to one location. So usually, this is something that if you're doing full truckload, you don't want to have to split those up. You want to send to the one location, and you're going to pay a certain set of fees for that. And they're going to be the highest fees, and it's fee per unit, which can be pretty crazy. It's not per cubic foot, it's fee per unit. So you have to factor that, in that shipment, everything that you're going to pay is going to be based on that fee.
Is that the most expensive option usually, or is that?
Yeah, that's the most expensive option, and it's done tiered by size as well.
So basically, the fee per unit is going to be based on how large each unit is. And I
Mhm.
guess in exchange for the convenience of being able to ship everything to one place, you pay for that convenience, it sounds like.
Mhm. Yeah,
So
and
so that's the option that's on the right, right? I
mhm.
guess. Okay.
It's on the left.
Okay.
On the left and I think with in terms of the policy. So in terms of logging in and actually setting up the shipment, it could be.
Okay.
So that should be preferred. And then there's multiple location. I think it's called multiple location. You send to 2 or 3 locations, and that's a different fee. So you're splitting your shipment up, and if you have full truckload, picking that will mean that you have to split everything up. You have to pay for 3 different trucks to send out to different locations, and so it's important to understand that you have to factor that in, not just the fee. The fee is reduced, and I will say that the fees that they give for each category are actually a range. So you have, a low side and a high side. It could be anything in between. So let's say, just for example, between 23 and 31 cents maybe is a range. The reason that this is a range is because Amazon's going to send the inventory, and based on whatever their algorithm is in terms of how far they're going to send it, they're going to charge you for each of those shipments. So they're not going to be able to say, this is how much. You're going to have, you're going to get hit with those fees. They're going to figure that out. And then I think it's 45 days later, you're going to be billed. So 45 days later, then you know how much that shipment actually cost you.
So this is actually, well, do they tell you the range in advance though?
You'll know the range in advance based on your product size.
Okay.
So
So I would know. So if I was doing a shipment this way, Amazon is going to tell me, okay, if you want to do it this way, splitting the shipment to a few different locations, because of the type of product you sell, it's probably going to cost you somewhere between 20 and 30 cents per unit. We don't know exactly how much yet, but between 20 and 30 cents a unit. And then 45 days later, they'll tell you what that was, I guess, right?
yeah, so I haven't been through the process in terms of upfront to say that they give you an estimate. You can, if you've got, every single unit, you should be able to say, knowing the size of my product, the estimate from the policy will be able to, like, as you're starting to factor in, I mean, you should look through your catalog and say, okay, factoring in what I know of the policy, I know what the high and the low point of each shipment is and which products I can afford to send. So it's kind of an exercise that you should be doing before you even get into shipping the products.
Yeah, I'm already getting anxiety from this, to be honest.
Yeah.
Um,
There is a way to avoid the fees. We'll kind of go through, and then I can introduce what some people are doing instead. There's a lot of movement in the direction of avoiding these fees through different supply chain methods.
okay, but wait, tell me the third way first.
Yeah. So the second way is the 2 to 3 locations, and that's another range of fees that's lower. And then the last one's called Amazon Optimized, and it's 4+ locations. So 4 locations or more, and you do not have a fee. There's no fee attached to that, but you pay for all the different shipments going out, which can be quite expensive.
Got it. So I guess the 3 options are, if I say it in reverse order from cheapest to most expensive, or I guess we can't tell which cheapest and more expensive, but option number 1 is Amazon has you send it all over the country in a bunch of shipments, but you don't pay any surcharge for it. That's option number 1. Option number 2 is you'll split it into 2 or 3 locations, and you'll pay a surcharge for Amazon maybe distributing it in their system within those 2 or 3 locations. And option number 3 is you ship it to one place, which is more convenient for you, but in exchange for Amazon distributing it all over the country, you pay the biggest premium of the 3.
Yep.
And I guess somewhere in your calculations has to be how much is the base shipping costing, so that together you're shipping plus your surcharge.
Yep. Yeah.
So
exactly.
so now you need to not only have Amazon's numbers there, you also need to run calculations each way for what your shipping fees would be.
Yep. Yeah, and get multiple quotes.
Oh gosh. So let me ask you this, because I vaguely know the answer.
Hmm.
Does SoStocked or any of the other products in the Carbon 6 family manage inbound shipping to get those estimates? Or do
At
they do the parts?
Not at this point. That's something I definitely want to get to the point. I mean, I'm really keen to get to the point where we have unit economics. Um, I don't know that actually, I do know that it doesn't exist in any of the platforms in the Amazon space. People who track unit economics are usually, high seven, 8, 9 figure sellers. And so as these fees get introduced, a person's unit economics change, and then you don't notice. And so one of the approaches that we're taking is how can we look at what is the product might have been profitable 6 months ago. So if you're operating on 6 months ago, as these fees become introduced or your supply chain changes, you may not be profitable, and you're spending a bunch of money and you're tying up cash flow on products that you probably should be retiring. So it's just, how do we look at that business and how do we move in that direction, which has been kind of one of my goals is, putting more and more features into the visibility of fees.
Okay. So I'll ask you a question that you might or might not know the answer, because you simply don't have to do it yourself.
Mm.
But if a person is a seller today
Mm.
and they have to do all this, is there a suggested group of steps they should be doing to have a handle on this? Like, step one is get your shipment together and weigh it all out. Step two is get the pricing for each of the three options. And then step four is figure out the fees. Is there something which is maybe more actual than the dumb way I just said it?
I think that, that's probably pretty close. You need to know what you're sending, the total shipment that you're sending. And then I would probably think that because Amazon gets to know your product and gets to know where you should ship to. And some people will see, oh, I always ship here, versus there. Amazon knows the demand of your product and they know the availability. And so they'll probably continually ship to the same places. So you can start getting quotes for, those locations. And I would not pack, you don't want to pack a truck and then create your shipment. You want to create your shipment, get your quotes, and pack the truck, right? Because we've had instances where we've heard people pack their truck and then they found out that Amazon split, and they say, oh, Amazon never gives a never splits into shipments or whatever. Well, now they do, right? So I think that that's important. It's important to get the quotes beforehand so that you can kind of make those decisions beforehand. And then I think after a while you'll start, because this is just something that came up over the last couple of months. After a while, you start developing a cadence of knowing a bit better how much it costs to ship in these different methods.
So this, I don't know if anybody has mentioned this because I haven't heard it before, but is anybody experiencing the truck companies getting super annoyed at being asked for quotes 7,000 times without people shipping the things? Like,
I don't know.
because like this is all of a sudden a life they never had to live before.
Yeah.
Essentially before, probably as long as they're the lowest price, they get every shipment. Now
Mhm.
the lowest price literally has nothing to do with it. So they're just giving out quotes all day long.
Yeah. Yeah, I imagine, unless it's, some people probably don't get multiple quotes necessarily. So, but I imagine, I mean, they have to adapt just as we do, especially if their business is mostly geared towards sellers.
Right. Yeah. If Amazon shipments are a big piece of their business just got sort of annoying with
Yeah.
this, because now they're pumping out tons of quotes, and it's just more that they didn't have to do before.
Yep. Yeah.
All right. So how can we do this better? What
Yeah.
what tips do you have for this?
Yeah. So a lot of people are, and it's, it's a dagger to the heart, but a lot of people are using Amazon warehousing and distribution. People were resistant, and it's giving up more control to Amazon, and there are, of course, a lot of negatives to it, being, you're dealing with Amazon customer service, and you can't just pick up a phone and call your 3PL. And your stuff can get locked in there. It's hard to get it out. There's a lot of problems with it, but Amazon has incentivized so strongly that for most people it makes sense. And so that's one of the ways that they're avoiding the inbound shipping, is they're sending right to Amazon warehousing and distribution. You don't have inbounding fees. You have transportation fees, but those are usually significantly less than what you would be paying in inbounding.
Okay, so explain this to me because I sort of understand it, but again, I haven't had to live it in forever.
Yeah.
When you use Amazon's logistics services, I guess, is that the right word to use?
Yeah, they
If
call
you're
it
using
supply chain by Amazon.
right, so if we're working with Amazon's logistics, what difference does it look like in terms of the process? Right now, when we ship things, we call the trucking company, we call UPS, however we're shipping it, we
Mhm.
make arrangements to ship it. And then
Yeah.
it goes from us to Amazon's warehouses.
Mhm.
What's different when we use Amazon's logistics? Where are we giving it to a different person? Is it going to a different place? What's different?
Mhm. Yeah, so there are different pieces of supply chain by Amazon. They had all these different programs, and then they put them all together and called it supply chain by Amazon. The first one they had, and they've had it for many, many years, is preferred the partner carrier program, which is, that these companies are companies we get reduced rates. You use it, you pay through Amazon, and so that's one program. And then you have they launched Amazon Global Logistics, which is shipping from overseas, and so that's the other piece of it. And the last one is Amazon warehousing and distribution. It's basically a 3PL.
So do we have to use all of those things or just one or any of them?
You can use any of them. If you're sending to Amazon warehousing and distribution, you can send it regardless. You can send it, with your own carrier. Amazon, though, incentivizes you if you use Amazon Global Logistics (AGL) or the preferred carrier. If
Right.
you're using these consistently, they're going to give you reduced rates at AWD. So you're looking at, they do what is it? Like if they have like the box processing fee, for example, the box processing fee, every box has a processing fee, and it's $2.50 per box. When you're using their other shipping, their logistics side of things, instead of $2.50, you're paying $2.13. So you start to get these considerable savings. Instead of paying 48 cents per cubic foot for storage, you're paying, I think it's 36 cents per cubic foot.
So you're saving 20% on one fee, 15% on another fee. And even though they're pennies and quarters, they add up at scale per unit and per foot.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
So basically tying into Amazon's logistics is the way to save because each of those elements is less expensive. And I guess also with using Amazon's logistics, the surcharges don't apply at all, right? Like it's just not part of the equation.
Yeah, you don't have peak storage. So your inventory is sitting there. When you have it at FBA, you're paying $2.40 per cubic foot in the fourth quarter. At Amazon, the rate stays the same. So it's 48 cents per cubic foot year round. So they get you there. And then you avoid the inbound fee, you avoid aged inventory because there's no aged inventory at AWD.
Right.
You don't have the storage capacity limits, and they also waive low inventory level fees if you have auto replenishment turned on, meaning you're allowing Amazon to fulfill rather than you telling Amazon how much to ship. So you won't have low inventory level fees because Amazon's in charge of keeping you supplied.
Got it. Now, this sounds wonderful, but I know that when it comes to ads, when Amazon tells me about something that turns out that sounds wonderful, it almost never works like that.
Mhm.
So, is it the same with Amazon Logistics? Are they making mistakes everywhere that they don't claim should happen?
So to be determined. Right now, there's a lot of people who are testing it out. It's had about a year and a half to breathe. There were a lot of mistakes, like nightmares before. I remember talking to a seller who he shipped in a container. I believe it was $130,000 worth of goods, and AWD just lost it. And he said, you got to find this. They said, well, FBA has it. We don't have it. FBA has it. FBA said, we don't have it. And so it was months. It was months to figure it out. And they took no responsibility. And so that was about a year and a half or a year ago. Nowadays, I haven't heard a lot of nightmares like that. But there's still just a lot of people who are finally kind of biting the bullet and moving over and testing out. So I'm kind of keeping my ears open for
Right.
new discoveries.
Yeah, so they might be better at doing it, but there's also going to be a question of what happens when it moves from early testers and early users of the system who are more advanced almost by definition to working with the average seller. And all of a sudden, it's 15x the number of units and 50x the number of people that don't know what they're doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the scalability question.
It's always going to be there, and
Yeah.
I'll give Amazon the credit for saying that they have scaled things under pressure better than anyone else, like in the history of business. I think,
Yeah.
when
COVID. Yeah.
when COVID came along, they spent maybe 2 weeks with crazy shipping times, and
Mm-hmm.
after 2 weeks, they figured it out.
Mm-hmm.
And when it came to building out their own Amazon delivery system, they figured it out and they scaled it up, and 90% of your packages come through those I don't know what even color is it, would we call it gray? Well, through those funny looking Amazon trucks all over the place now.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So they're really good at that stuff. So I have to imagine that they should be all right at handling the logistics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they've had a while, to let it breathe. Like I said, it's just one of those things where I do think at this time having another 3PL as a backup until you feel like you can trust, and then maybe you don't ever get rid of that. It just depends on what you feel you're comfortable with.
I would imagine that there's still going to be a couple of factors. So factor number one is when FBA runs out of stock, or whatever issue there might be, whenever there is some issue keeping your FBA goods from showing to shoppers, you want to be able to merchant fulfill orders.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's all at Amazon, you lose that ability to merchant fulfill orders.
Yeah.
The second thing is probably going to be the ability to handle orders for other platforms.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to dip your toe into TikTok, if all your goods are at Amazon, you can't dip your toe in and send out 30, 40 orders.
Mm-hmm.
You can do that with the goods being at your own place. So there's still going to be reasons to keep some cushion of products by you.
Yeah, and it's not a fulfillment center. Everything they deal in boxes. So you can send boxes to another location. They won't be able to send shipments because it's not fulfillment. But if you wanted to send shipment boxes out to, let's say, a fulfillment center that you have outside of that, you would be able to do that. But that, again, is another fulfillment center. So might make more sense to keep a little bit on hand at a 3PL that also does fulfillment if you do have that other channel.
Have you seen anybody doing that? I guess a different way to ask it is a request to send goods from their warehouse to a place different from Amazon, is that such a crazy request that they lose their mind and always screw it up? Or is it a regular thing that happens?
I don't think that it's been utilized as much, enough to be able to have heard many stories about it. It's something that Amazon offers, but since most people are using it as a secondary source or they're just getting into it, they usually have another 3PL where they handle that, or they ship direct from FBA, for example. They fulfill, their other channels through FBA.
Right. The acronym evades me, but yeah, there is the what is it called when you ship multi-channel orders from
Yeah,
MFC?
MCF.
MCF. There we go.
Yep.
Yes. All right. So yeah. So MCF is something where it is still possible to do, just not from the Amazon distribution center,
Mhm.
from Amazon's FBA facilities.
Yep.
Okay. Very good. All right. So that's one set of fees, which is pretty crazy. That
Yeah.
we can talk this much about one group of fees, but that's not even half of what Amazon has rolled out.
Yeah.
I think the second fee that's being rolled out is a low inventory fee.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
for those of you who are not so in tune with your accounts, basically Amazon has decided that if you don't have enough inventory for the flow of orders, that they will add a charge to every single unit sold.
Hmm.
So another way to say it is, if every month you sell 100 pieces of a product and all of a sudden you dip below that average of 100, Amazon is going to charge you for every piece you sell until you get your inventory level up above average. Is
Hmm.
that pretty much correct?
Yeah. There are some, there's a little bit of padding between that. So what they're looking at is they're looking at historical averages. So they're not
Right.
looking at what inventory you have in stock today. They're looking at, do you have a pattern of not keeping enough inventory in stock? And they'll look at the
Right.
past 30 days and the past 90 days. And they will, if both of those time periods are under the threshold, then you'll be charged fees. So maybe
Right.
30 days, and the threshold is less than 28 days of supply.
Right. So as I understand it, basically Amazon takes two time frames, one short and one longer,
Mm-hmm.
and basically they look at both numbers and they calculate based on the lower of the two numbers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So if, for example, last month you sold 500 pieces because it was December and it was Christmas, but really your 90-day average is only 50 pieces a month. 50 is your number to stay above, not the 100. So I guess that keeps you from being beaten up in January when, of course, you're not selling as much, or you might not have as much inventory as you needed for December. It's
Mm-hmm.
not so much the number of orders you get, it's the amount of inventory you have. So,
It's the it's the average inventory. It's confusing because at first the thinking was I can take the amount of inventory I have and I can compare it to the number of orders, but they actually take the average of inventory. So they look at every single day, how much did you have over the past 30 days, then they average it, and then they do that for the 90 days. So it's complicated, but there's a metric that you can actually track. It's on the dashboard. There's an inventory dashboard. You can see it there. My favorite report of all time in Amazon that I don't think people really know about is the FBA inventory report. It has probably 50 different data points. And one of the data points is historical days of supply. So you can download this report, and on an ASIN by ASIN basis, you can see that number. Where does each product fall within that number? Are you getting close to that 28-day threshold? And the less and less you have, the rates increase. So you're going to be charged a fulfillment fee. The low inventory fee is a fulfillment fee. So you're not being charged because the inventory is sitting there. You're being charged on every unit that ships out. So you can look at that FBA inventory report and see which of those products are at risk and which of those products are already incurring fees.
Okay, so two things. The
Mhm.
first question is that information only available in the report, or is it available in the regular Amazon website and dashboard?
Mhm.
I'm pretty sure
Yeah.
the information is available in the regular Seller Central portal,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, it's
Um,
available there. If you have a lot of ASINs, you'll probably want to download the report. But if you
right.
don't, then you can just
And,
see it right on there.
and this leads me to the second question.
Mhm.
You said something that I don't think I've ever heard someone say before,
Mhm.
which is an Amazon FBA inventory report is your favorite report.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody has said anything like that. I don't think anybody has even said those words in a different order. So,
Yeah.
so tell me, I need to understand better what makes you love this report so much. The
Yeah.
first question I'm going to ask is for anybody who doesn't use this report, where do they find it in Amazon?
Yep.
But besides that, what do you love about it so much? What
Mhm.
thing is it telling you that puts a smile on your face? Like what's
Yeah.
so good about this report?
Yeah.
You're giggling like a schoolgirl as I talk to you about
Yeah.
the FBA inventory report, but I
Yeah.
need to understand this better.
Yeah. First of all, I'm a total nerd. Um, the report can be found under reports, fulfillment, and then there's an inventory section. You go down and you actually have to click more so that it opens all of the inventory reports, and it's right at the bottom, which is why I think it's hidden. And the part of the reason that I really like this report is we've been releasing tools in the dashboard to be able to track your low inventory and what we call impending inventory fees, which is these are getting in the danger zone. We have dashboards specifically for tracking aged inventory and knowing when your products are going to be, incurring aged inventory fees. All of this data is in the report. So there's an API version of the report and there's a Seller Central version. So when I get these wild ideas, people need to know these things. They need to be able to, forecast their fees, all that. I look at that report and I go, is that data there? And the data's there. So that's why I get so excited. It's like, it's here. It's the stuff I've been talking about. I've been talking about profitability and fees for years. And so to discover that this report was in Seller Central, even if someone's not using SoStock and not using the dashboard, there are ways that they can find data that's going to help them. It has all the, besides just the historical days of supply, which is the inventory, the low inventory fee, it has the age of your inventory. So you can see if your product is about to get hit with aged inventory fees. You can see when, how many units, because maybe you've got 1,000 units and only 300 are incurring these heavy fees and the other 700 are not. So with this data, you can strategically approach your business from a fee prevention strategy.
Got it. So I imagine that this comes in the form of a spreadsheet. It's probably a CSV or XLXS
Yep.
or whatever the letters are, and
Mhm.
you pull it and you open up and you get a massive grid of numbers and squares.
Yep.
I know that within ads, I have my own set of reports, and search term reports and placement reports and other things like that.
Mhm.
But when it comes to this FBA inventory report,
Mhm.
how hard is it to pull out the data that you need to take an action? So what do
Mhm.
I when I
Yeah.
look at the one of my, for example, the search term report, I can just look at one column and very simply everything above X number needs an action, or
Mhm.
everything below X number needs an action.
Yep.
Really as simple as that.
Mhm.
Is that inventory report as simple as this number should be below X or this number should be above Y? And if it's not in those, you take an action, or does it require massaging the data, as someone once told me, in order to get out what you need?
Yeah. So, yes and no. I guess you can get more granular, and I think that it's important to understand you can do something with the report if you have just a basic knowledge. It becomes more helpful when you're able to project that, which is what we do. We project it 8 to 12 months in advance, looking at what your actual forecast is, because we have a forecast timeline in SoStocked. So there's data that you can get inside of the report that will help you down that road before getting into, massaging the data and projecting it out and all of that. And that is downloading the report. And I actually, Vanessa Hung and I did a workshop. I think it's still available to access, carbon6.io/fee stack. I think we got a white paper and we did a workshop. And so the workshop will walk you through, how do you download this report? You're going to download the report. It's going to show you what columns are there. And the columns are toward the end. It's like, starting at, BI or something like that. And you're looking at all of the inventory that's aged. I would start from the one that shows you anything over a year, that it's been sitting there for over a year. It's incurring a lot of fees. On top of normal storage fees, you're at a year, you're incurring $6.90 per cubic foot. So you're paying a lot, even if it's only, a couple hundred units. So I would download the report. I would sort greatest to, highest to lowest on that and say, okay, these are the first things I have to tackle. You look at your, start from anything over 270 days. And so all of those from 1 year to 270 days, those are the things that are costing you the most money.
Right.
That's
basically like 9 to 12 months, I guess, right?
Yeah, exactly. 9 to 12 plus month. And so those are the first things to look at. Every successive month from 9 months on to a year, it's going to get more and more expensive. So you target those, you're paying. So you get that you handle the emergency on that. And the strategy that's involved, I'm very obsessed with knowing how the policy works. If you know a couple of things, you can make strategies around them. And I like to talk about marketing has a huge hand in the profitability of a business. And that there's a piece that people don't factor in, and that's marketing the inventory that's incurring the fees, right? If I'm just looking at revenue drivers and I'm not looking at these duds that are costing me, I might be making money on this side, and then on the other side, I'm being charged, $5,000 per month on aged inventory fees, which we've seen before.
I've had accounts like that where basically our challenge or our mission is to get rid of the old goods using marketing, and we'll basically push very hard with ads to get those goods out. There is actually an interesting software that helps with this. There's a software called AZ Seller Kit. I don't know if you've heard of those guys, but they have velocity-based pricing. So essentially what they do is you tell it that you want the goods to go and how fast you want it to go, and they will test to find the price that it moves at the speed you want. Now, the asterisk is that the price where it moves at the speed you want, it might be much lower than the price you want to sell at. So you might have to sell it well below cost to get it out. But if you want all of your goods out before the highest fees hit, they will find that price. So if you have goods that are at the 8-month point, say you have 100 units at the 8-month point, you set that system to sell 100 units a month. And it's going to find the price that gets it out before the fees hit. And I know that a lot of times, depending on the price of the goods and depending on how old it is, within a few months, you can exceed the value of the product. So it's almost worth it to throw it in the garbage. So paying any price to sell them, a lot of people will say, well, why don't I just throw it in the garbage? Well, the answer is that if you sell those products at any price, you get the benefit of people possibly leaving you reviews for that product, and you get the benefit of units being moved. And when units move, the product rank improves. So there is a value to actually selling them at any price instead of waiting for your price or disposing of them. But so how often should somebody do this? It sounds like once a month they should pull this report and then pull, I guess the first time they do it, they're pulling 9 to 12 months. And then after that, they're taking action on 9 to 12 months.
Right. Yep.
After the first time, if all of their actions have been fruitful, 9 to 12 months is cleared out. And now you're just looking at 8 months to get it out before, before that month hits. So that would be like once a month. But is that once a month frequency also good enough for monitoring these low inventory fees?
So first, from the aged inventory perspective, when you're looking at the 9 to 12 months, I call it crisis management. You go through your process of crisis management, and to your point, that you want to sell through as much as possible. The pattern, there's actually timing involved, because Amazon assesses fees on a certain date. Right?
Every Monday or something they do the assessment?
Well, so that's for low inventory. For aged inventory, so aged inventory is calculated different than monthly storage. Monthly storage looks at an average and charges you on the average cubic foot per unit.
Right.
And aged inventory charges you they assess on the 15th. So as long as you get it out by the 15th, then it's not going to be charged fees. So the recommendation is download that report on the 16th of the month.
Yep.
Aggressively market and check every week or every couple of days, depending on your cadence, and make sure that it's moving. We have some columns for 2-day, 7-day, 15-day, 30-day velocity, and we want to see movement between those velocities to make sure that that inventory is actually moving, right? Is the pricing working? And then by the 14th of the month, if you have inventory left over and you're like, we can't move this, you've got that whole month to try to move it. And then by the 14th of the month, you make the decision and you can place a liquidation order. I don't recommend doing a removal order because it's very expensive unless you can sell it elsewhere. But placing a liquidation order, there's a likelihood that you're going to get some money back over the next 90 days. If Amazon can liquidate it, they're going to take some fees out, and it's going to be significantly less. It's going to be, they get a 5 to 10% return on what your actual retail price is. Right. They take 15% of that, of course, because, why wouldn't they? They're Amazon. And then they charge a processing fee. But generally, you'll end up with a little bit of cash back in your pocket. So I like to think of it as net savings. What did we save, avoid in fees, and what did we get back in terms of liquidation and marketing, so that you're turning a fee liability into a cash positive solution.
Right. Well, there is an asterisk also, though. The asterisk is when Amazon disposes of or liquidates those products, a lot of times those end up floating out in the world of liquidators. And depending on the liquidator that it ends up with, that product might end up being sold back on your listing by another person, and they'll mess you up by taking away your buy box or by undercutting the price. So if you have a product that costs you $6 to manufacture and you sell it for $29.95, that's your price. After you factor in Amazon fees and advertising and everything else, it leaves you with a few dollars. If Amazon is liquidating it on the market for 40 cents, there's going to be a person that buys it at 40 cents and sells it for $14.95. So all of a sudden, they're taking away your buy box because of these things that you already lost money on during liquidation. You get the honor of being smacked in the face a second time when they hurt your sales of the actual new products. So that's sort of a thing to keep in mind.
Yeah, that's true. And, liquidations are always best for if you're not going to continue to carry the product, of course. So there are things to weigh, and, the decisions differ. But one of the things that we are going to be, doing soon, we're very close to, how do you actually make those decisions? There's the individual, understanding of your own business. but then there's also the data involved, right? How much am I going to be charged in fees?
Right.
And we calculate that, and then we look at how much does it cost to remove all of these units, which units to remove. I have 1,000 units. I don't need to remove all of them, just the ones that are being charged fees. Which units to remove? How much is it going to cost me if I don't remove it? How much is it going to cost me if I remove it or dispose of it versus if I liquidate it versus if I drop my price significantly? How much money am I going to make back? Can I actually sell it? Because some products are just dead in the water. And so those factors put all across side by side, which is what we've been piloting with a couple of our of our sellers that we work with. Putting those together, then you can make the decision, as opposed to what happens generally is, I know there's a problem, but I don't know what to do with it. I don't have the information, so I'm just going to do what I've been doing all this time and just try not to look at my storage fee bill.
Do you have sellers that are guinea pigs?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like they actually say, we're willing to try anything and we're not scared of what's going to happen?
Yeah, it's I mean, when you have the guinea pigs, it tends to be a very hands-on relationship. So as we start out building out the programs, fee prevention is one of those, and we have the insights into what are those policies, and then we can look at the catalog and we can run the numbers on how old is this inventory, what inventory is causing the most damage. And we're working with a seller who has quite a high level of inventory, aged inventory. And so we've been able to avoid $25,000 in inventory fees simply by strategically planning, going, okay, these ones I can price drop. These ones, some of them are I can remove those. Those are bundle packs. I can remove them and sell them as singles. These ones I'm gonna liquidate. And
right. You have to know your products, basically.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
listen, that's true in a general way. You have to know your products, but
Mm-hmm.
there is a reality in which you really have to know your products in order to be creative with the options for these kinds of things.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of sellers on Amazon who are either wholesalers just buying things off of a spreadsheet where the metrics fit, or they're selling a product that they don't necessarily have a passion for. So they don't really understand the buyer thinking because they're not necessarily the buyer,
Mm-hmm.
or something else. And if they don't understand their products as well as someone else who is in tune, they might fall behind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So what we've been talking about now is avoiding fees for things that get very old.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But if we get into the aspect of avoiding fees for low inventory,
Mm-hmm.
how would we use that FBA inventory report to make that more palatable?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the low inventory fees, you download the FBA inventory report, and there's one metric called historical days of supply. And so that's all Amazon, where they look at 30 days and they look at 90 days and they put it all together. That one number is them having done that calculation.
So
So
that's the number. So after they have figured out the high number and after they figured out the low number, they come up with this third number. And this third number is the one you need to stay above.
yeah, it's actually one of the two numbers. It's if my low number is, 26, but my high number is 32, I have 32 days of supply. They're going to give you the benefit of the doubt that whatever is higher, they're going to keep you above that range. But if both
Right.
numbers are below the range, then you're below the range.
Okay, so let me clarify this. The
Mhm.
number, is there a number that we need? I mean, there is a number we have to stay above in terms
Yep.
of inventory. Is
Yep.
that number in the report?
The number isn't the number of days of supply you have is in the report.
Right.
The threshold is anything under 28 days.
Right. But are they telling us what the threshold is?
They do in the policy, but not on that report. So you
Okay.
just have to know anything under 21 days of supply is a problem. I'm getting charged fees for those.
Got it. So
Yeah.
basically, the report is telling us how many days Amazon estimates you have.
Yep.
And you have to know that you need to stay below 28. You need to stay above 28 days.
Yeah.
For anyone listening, it's actually more than 28 days because Amazon does the evaluation only once a week. So if they
Yeah.
evaluate on Monday and you are below, they are charging you for the whole week until Monday, even if more goods got checked in on Tuesday or Wednesday.
Yeah.
So it is technically a bit more. But
Yeah.
putting that aside,
Yeah.
how accurate is that number?
Mhm.
How reliable is it? And the reason I ask this is because back when I was selling, even though it's a whole bunch of years ago, Amazon used to give us metrics for 7 days units sold and 30 days units sold, and I think 90 to 70. Like they gave us 4 or 5 different numbers for units sold.
Yeah.
But weirdly, when you would set the alerts to tell you when it's below X amount of days, the alert would not trigger like something that matched how many units you've been selling a lot of times. So you might be selling 35 units a month. And if you tell Amazon, I want to be alerted when I have less than 30 days left, the alert wouldn't go on at 35 units. The alert would go on either at 50 units or 16 units. Like they wouldn't be able to tell that you've been selling 35, even though the 35 is right in front of your face.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
is this number a reliable number, or should we pad it? Like where do we go with that number to start with?
Yep. So what you have in FBA today is it's not as important as what you had the last 30 days or the last 90 days, because they're not looking at, do you have 35 based on your velocity now? Do you have 35 unit days, or do you have 28 days of inventory to sell? Right? It's not based on what you have today compared to what your average sales were. It's looking at your average sales and looking at your past inventory levels. So it's not today's inventory levels. It's over the past 30 days, your average was, 30 units per day. As you sell through, the average, decreases. But then if you send in a ton of inventory, that spike of inventory can correct that entire 30-day average. So it's all about what is your average inventory for the past 30 days or the past 90 days.
Yeah,
If
I
that
got it.
makes sense.
Right. And they're giving you a number of days, not a number of units, right? So
Yeah.
you'll have one column, which is a number of days. And then you'll have one column, which is a units in stock, I imagine. And then you can do the calculation to say this many units equals this many days.
Yeah, you can do your estimate. You can say, and that report, my favorite report, has 30 days. They do it by units shipped. They don't do it by units sold. They do it by units shipped. And they'll say 30 units, units shipped 30 days and units shipped 90 days. And those are 2 metrics in that report. And so you can go, okay, take those numbers, divide it by the 30 days or the 90 days. And then it gives you an idea of what your daily average is, from the past.
Right. So are these numbers that they give us in the report the same as the numbers we'd see on the dashboard?
Yeah.
It tells you when you're
theoretically, I would say theoretically. Yeah, they should all match.
So basically we should be able to pull this report, determine when inventory is getting low and head off before. I mean, the guidance that I've been telling my clients who choose to discuss this with me, I tell them, listen, you do not want to wait for 28 days. That's already too late.
Yep.
So essentially at 45 days, that's when you should be sending in goods already, and you should be sending in another 60 days worth of goods. So ideally, before the 28 days, if you start getting your shipment together at 45 days, you have about 2 weeks to get the goods into Amazon, and that's usually enough time. So you will replenish before dipping below 28. And then you just rinse and repeat that number, I think.
Yeah, as long as you stay on average above that 28 days, you're good. So we usually say that the buffer stock minimum should be 35. So if you're between 35 and 75 days of supply, we do what we call min-max restocking, which is you have a minimum and then you have a maximum. And every time you send in, you get to your maximum, sell through to the minimum. And it's kind of that cycle. If you've got 35 to 75 days of supply, and that's the cadence that you're sending in, you shouldn't have trouble. You should be fine.
Right. Yeah. I imagine that this is inventory management 101. And ideally, people who were in tune with their business should anyway have been sending goods into Amazon with a steadiness, so it should have been periodic, and you always should have inventory within a reasonable range. What's the inventory level where you start to have penalty fees? Is it above a certain number of days that you shouldn't go over as you send in goods? Like, I imagine that sending in 10 months of goods is too much. That's going to end up likely charging you too much in storage fees.
Yeah.
But is there a sweet spot which is right below the threshold of triggering something like that?
Yeah. So there's what we recommend, which is no more than 90 days. You're not going to be charged extra fees, but you're going to be charged on some of those units 3 times, 3 months of storage. So 90 days is what we advise as the maximum, 35 days being the minimum. And you're not going to be penalized if you go above that, but you're paying over and over. When you get to 6 months of supply, if that inventory, whatever's sitting there at 6 months, is when your first aged inventory fees kick in. So you're not being penalized in terms of an extra fee for sending too much in. You're being penalized for it sitting there too long.
Right.
So at 6 months, that's when the fees kick in. And then at 9 months, they go from $1.50 per cubic foot to $5.45 per cubic foot. So that at month 8, you better do something.
So essentially 6 months is when penalties start to kick in. But really, even 90 days, that's starting to be an amount of storage fee which impacts. It's not necessarily a penalty, but even the regular fees end up being a lot.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, so that's probably the better way to say it. Even the regular fees, you don't want to pay too much of those. So sending it in too many months early means you'll be eating that up just in the regular storage fees, which is, I think it's something a lot of people don't realize. Is there a window that you can be under where no fees are assessed? Is there like a 30 or 60 days or something?
So no, I mean, they can be very little, but fees for, monthly storage fees are calculated differently than the aged inventory fees, where they look at, what you have there on the 15th of the month. Monthly storage is calculated on the average. So if you send inventory in and then you sell through it, the average of how much inventory you had that month is going to be charged. So every unit is in that average somewhere.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Amazon is charging you for every unit in one way or another, and you have to find the sweet spot between the lowest fees and the most painful ones, I guess.
Yeah.
All right. So I know that Amazon actually, as much as we spoke about it just now, Amazon actually made some updates to this program, right? And they did it just this morning in terms of interesting timing. Do you want to touch on what those changes were? And even if I know that one of the changes, to jump the gun, I know that Amazon actually said that they're not going to charge these low inventory fees for products that sold less than 20 units the month before. So if it's a product that doesn't sell very many every month, you'll just never have to worry about those fees. That way you don't have to keep sending in inventory of something that's not great.
Yeah, actually it's better than that. It's 20 units over the last 7 days.
Oh, so 20 units over the last 7 days is that the same as 20? Is that the same as? Wait, 7 days. So 7 times 20 times 4 is 80 units a month.
Yeah.
Is that the same as 80 units a month, or is it only 20 in the last 7 days?
They reassess every week. So my guess is that they look at, the last week, and then they, do it based on that, because they were specific about that 7 day period.
Yeah, the 7 day, I imagine that it's important because when you have a period like December, sales fall off a cliff.
Mm-hmm.
So you need that reassessment within 7 days, and not, with you need that reassessment within 7 days and not within 30 days. But the
Mm-hmm.
truth is, that number, like right away, I have a problem with that number, because it should be a relative percentage, not a number. If
Yeah.
you have a product that sold 25,000 units in December, and you go from 25,000 units to 2,000 units,
Yeah.
that's a 90% drop, but
Yeah.
it's still 2,000 units. You dropped off 90%,
Yeah.
but it's still 2,000 units. You're going to
Yeah.
get penalized. You're going to get penalized for 2,000 units because you're behind that level.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
it really should be a percentage drop off more than a units drop off, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And we've actually done, when you have 3 months worth of a season, we haven't done some studies on that. I think that's going to be the biggest hit. But we did do a study on, back to school, for example. So about a 2 month period, and then it drops off. And we're able to see that, between the beginning and the peak, you were fine, right? Because you had a 90 days, the 30 days might have been below the threshold, but your 90-day number was above the threshold. And then as you move deeper into that season, you're okay as well. When you get further out of that season, then you start incurring low inventory fees. So in the example that we ran, it was like end of August, beginning of September, that that season ended, and then about a month and a half later, those fees kicked in. So so that's kind of, we can say that pattern is something that you would want to pay attention to.
Right. Okay. Oh
And then as
gosh.
far as like a strategy, because one of the things that we were talking to one of the clients about, should I do AWD? Well, what if they send in too much inventory? Because if you've got Amazon auto replenishing, they could, you come out of your season and they still think that you're going gangbusters. They send in a bunch of inventory from Amazon warehousing and distribution into.
Right. They're sending 25,000 units because you sold 25,000 units last month.
Yeah, exactly. So one of the things that we talk about is this strategy of, if you've got your stuff at AWD, you don't want to get stuck with it sitting there outside of your season, collecting all these fees. You'd rather be paying the storage fees that are lower at AWD. But what you can do is, as your season starts to come to an end, turn off the auto replenishment so that Amazon's not making the decision of how much to send. What that's going to do is you're going to be liable for low inventory fees. You're going to send the inventory in yourself, but Amazon only waives low inventory fees if they're auto replenishing. So you can say, okay, I don't trust your formula for how much you're going to send in, so I'm turning it off. I'm controlling it by myself for the next month. And then I'm turning it on right before I get the low inventory fees so that I get my fees waived. So those are kind of like some of the strategies where, if you know how the fees work, you know how the programs work, you can fit them together to leverage, fee avoidance, kind of skating between the lines.
Right. Is it in theory possible to keep turning on and off auto replenish once a week in order to always avoid those fees, but never have replenishing happening?
I can't recall the policy off the top of my head, but they do have some benchmarks for what allows you to waive, right? Off the top of my head, I can't remember it, but they do have benchmarks. They also have benchmarks for if you're going to get those reduced rates for using, the logistics side. So if you wanted the, $2.13 per box fee versus the $2.50 per box fee, they say, you have to send in something once a month. So I think that they have something like that for auto replenishment. If they're going to waive a fee, they're going to do it, they're going to set some guidelines. So I don't.
Right.
So I would say look at what those guidelines are to know if you qualify.
Got it. Okay. So in short, tactic number one is to use Amazon's distribution network and their fulfillment and distribution network. And I guess tactic number two is to live inside that inventory report so that you're really on top of that inventory level.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So this brings us to fee number three, as though fee number one and fee number two were not enough. Amazon now has, am I correct that it is an excess return fee?
Yeah.
What would be
Returns
the
processing fee.
Yeah, I mean, as I understand it, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, the fee is basically assessed if Amazon has benchmarks for what they think returns should be in every category.
Yep.
So say you sell shoes have a 15% return fee. If you sell t-shirts have a 18% return fee. Whatever is the return fee of your category, if Amazon sees that your return rate is worse than your category, then they'll also charge you a penalty. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
So how does that work exactly?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So spend some time on this. Amazon will look at your, and this starts in June. So they'll look at June and they'll see how many units were shipped in June. So let's say 1,000 units were shipped, and they'll have a threshold. So let's say 8%. 8% out of 1,000, 80 units is the threshold. If anything more than 80 units comes back, then you're in trouble.
Right.
Then they look at the next 3 months and they see of all of those units, how many of them actually came back. The debatable part, the question was, well, how do they keep counting in the next 3 months, right? Do they count?
While you're thinking about how to say it right.
Yeah.
Just to confirm, Amazon knows that not everybody who requests a return actually sends the product back.
Right.
And the difference between the requests and the things coming back is such a big difference that they actually have to recalculate it.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not like a 1% difference. Apparently it's so much that they have to basically come back to you a little while later and say, well, we know that 100 people requested returns, but only 34 pieces came back.
Yeah. And then also, for whatever reason, if anything comes back in July or in August that was sold and shipped in June, they're going to charge you for that too. So they're waiting for things to come back. It's interesting because it kind of comes head to head with the fact that there's a 30-day return policy, except around the holidays. So
are
kind
they going
to get a return after 3 months in?
Are they going according to the time the product was sold or according to the time the request was made? Or does it even make a difference? Because I imagine if somebody buys something in December, they request the return in January, the percentages are all off the rails and vice versa. So, for example, the return rate in December is super low because technically the people asking for returns from what they bought in November compared to December sales is small. If you sell 100 pieces in November and 10 people want to return it, that's 10 requests in December, but you sold 800 units instead of the 100 of the month before. So it's tiny. But in January, the opposite happens. 10% of that 500 is like almost all your sales coming back.
Yeah.
So are they going according to one or to the other, or does it even matter?
So they're looking at all 3 of those months. They're looking at what is the return threshold for the units actually sold. Based on the language, it's hard to understand, but I'm pretty sure based on a single word in the policy, because Amazon, you got to parse this stuff. They say we're looking at June, we're looking at the units shipped in June, and then we're looking at of those units, and the word that makes me think that they're actually looking at like on an order basis, like order ID, XYZ came back. That was sold in June. So that goes towards June's penalties. So even if it came back in, July, it counts for June, Right.
So it's from when the request was made, basically. Oh, wait.
When the product was shipped, and then
Okay.
if it came back within the next 3 months.
Got it. So
Yeah.
it is true according to sales, basically. So
Yeah.
this percentage of these transactions came back, that
Mhm.
it is an accurate measurement, which
Yeah.
which is appropriate because
Mhm.
it is against the time that it was sold.
Yeah. And then
And
it'll wait for that 3 months, June, July, August, and then in September is when you actually get the bill.
right. I mean, the truth is the method of measuring almost doesn't matter because it is the same for everybody. So
Mhm.
there isn't a way you're being treated less fairly or a measuring loophole that you can exploit because it's simply being calculated the same for everybody.
Mhm.
Now,
Yeah,
the
the
other
only I
question,
can see now is I could see competitors buying products just to return them just to screw with their competition. If there's gonna be a whole other whole other thing. that
well, that is always an issue, but Amazon also knows how to determine abnormal buy and return rates.
Mm,
They can tell when like uh, a certain rate of buying is a little bit weird compared to how you always sell
mm,
things. So if, for example, every day you make 100 orders and it's distributed like 6 this hour, 7 this hour, 8 this hour, like every hour you sell a certain amount.
mhm,
If all of a sudden 15 units get sold in 90 minutes, Amazon actually knows that that was a little bit weird.
mm,
And on top of it, if all those 15 ask to return, they also know that it's a little bit weird. I
mhm,
don't know how much they take action on it,
mhm.
but if you an open investigation, if you feel that you're being manipulated, they
Yeah.
actually have access to that information to tell if things are way off.
Mhm. That's good.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Whether the algorithm accounts for that
I
will
mean,
be
my
another.
no, the algorithm is definitely not going to be accounting for that because it's definitely true that the person doing the programming is not the same as the person doing the thinking.
Yeah, and the
Almost
person doing the
definitely true.
programming of this policy and that policy are not, you've
No.
got policies that conflict.
Oh, 100%. And every conflict results in a different piece of the software bumping into each other.
Yeah.
But I guess it's still too soon to tell. But number one is, can we be confident that these return rates are correct? And what do I mean?
Mhm,
Say, for example, you are in the shoes category. In reality, the shoe category might have a 15% rate, but because you sell boat shoes and
mhm,
boat shoes is its own sub category, really boat shoes has a 20% rate.
mhm,
If you're being correctly measured against boat shoes, you have a 20% rate. If you're being measured against shoes, you're going to be killed because you're always going to be high. And so is everybody in the boat shoes category. Do we know how deep they're going into the category tree to make sure it's correct?
I don't know that. They didn't release the thresholds until I think it was yesterday. I haven't had a chance to peek. The people who would probably know the best would be people in the apparel, because apparel has been dealing with this, you know, for I believe several years, if not, all time. They have a high return rate. So they've been dealing with this policy a lot. It's not a new policy, it's newly applied to everyone,
Right.
basically.
Yeah. I mean, I'm giving the example of apparel just as an example, but
Yep.
the theory is the same for everything. I mean, I
Mhm.
can tell you now, apparel is really crazy, and somebody actually explained it to me once. So I know somebody that sells fancy dresses on Amazon.
Mhm.
Their dresses are like in the $600 to $1,000 price range.
Wow.
They're a
Mhm.
known brand, and they sell in retail and they sell on Amazon. They actually account for a 70% return rate. Their baseline is 70%. And the lady who runs the brand, that her name's on the brand, she actually explained it to me. She says, listen, we build our prices based on having a 70% return rate. Because if you think about it, two things happen which are a little bit crazy for this category. Number one, it's a known thing that people buy things for events and return it right afterwards. This is
Mhm.
already something which screws up our return rates. But number two, you get a lot of people who will buy multiple sizes because they are not sure what fits. They'll
Yeah.
buy size 2 and size 3, or they'll buy size 1, 2, and 3 because they're not sure.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody buys 3 sizes because they're not sure what fits, and they return 2 and keep that, that's a 65% return rate. And they're happy.
Mm-hmm.
The person that's happy made a 65% return. And the person that decided not to keep it is 100% return.
Yeah.
So they really have to have insane calculations for their things.
Mm-hmm.
But that's also why the cost of goods is so different than the price of selling. I imagine that when they may sell a dress for $700, it almost definitely costs under $100 to make. But you've got to account for 70% returns, and that has to be baked in. And most of the things that come back are probably not resellable. People get stains on them. They squeeze into things that don't fit, or worse. So it's all donated or worse.
Yeah.
Okay, so if we have to hope that Amazon is going to categorize our products correctly. It's not no guarantee at all. But putting that aside, is there anything we can do about it, or it's just welcome to life?
I mean, I would say the only thing that you can proactively do about it is, look at your returns history now before the fees kick in. And then if you don't have an inspection company, you should probably get one. It's not easy fixes, but it's like, look at your negative reviews, fix the things that you're finding in your negative reviews, work with your supplier to fix those things, work with your inspection company. You should probably have, if you're not using one very often. I mean, I was just on a panel with Sajug from Mavli. And
that guy's the best.
What's that?
That guy's the best.
Yes. Yeah. So, he's always been a proponent of inspections all the time. And this is just another sign. Inspections all the time. If you're paying $300 for an inspection, but you're avoiding having a bad batch, that not only does it, destroy your ranking, it, having, negative reviews, returns, it all adds up and compounds. And now this gets even more expensive now that you have this return rate. So that would be, one approach is look at your negative reviews, work with your supplier, work with your inspection company, and then constantly monitoring to make sure that you're not slacking.
Right. So essentially, run your business better than you have been doing already. But also do what you should have been doing up until now, which is to be on top of your returns. I mean, those are real things. So if you are getting a return rate which is high, up until now, you could have been a little bit lazy about it. Now you're going to be penalized for it. But what does the fee look like? Is it a lot, or is it just a minor annoyance?
It's a lot. The fees are very high. There's a whole list of them, so it's hard to kind of name all of them here, but I'll give you an example of one that we were, I was doing some training on. At product at large standard size, that's between 1.25 and 1.5 pounds, you're looking at $4.01 per cubic foot. Per unit.
So besides getting a return, you will have a penalty of $4 for each of those on top of the return.
Yeah. So for example, one of the examples I ran was if I have returns, let's say 35 units over the threshold, I'm going to get a bill, if it's $4 a pop, I'm going to get a bill for $140 for those 35 units that were returned.
Right. So on top of getting back a bunch of crap, you're going to have to pay for the privilege.
Yeah. Which one of the good things though is, in terms of the marketplace, is that people are going to get a lot better at not having crappy products on Amazon.
Ideally.
Hopefully.
Ideally. But here's the question. Is it possible? I believe that there is a setting in Amazon in which you can just tell Amazon that you don't want to take any returns. You can tell Amazon that any customer who doesn't want the product can just dispose of it, and you're not even going to take it back.
Yeah.
Will turning on that setting avoid will it avoid those fees, or
Yeah.
are they going to be charging based on refunds that they issue?
No, it'll avoid those fees. Yeah, because it's a returns policy. It's not a refunds policy. So yeah, so that's a very good point. And I actually I returned some makeup yesterday. I think it was yesterday. It made my skin burn, so I returned it,
Oh my
and they
gosh.
said we don't want it back. So if you have consumables where if they send it back, then you don't, you know,
Oh my God.
you
Wait,
can't do anything.
so I have to ask you a completely unrelated question.
Yeah.
Like, so completely. Is it the biggest no-no in the world for someone to use your lipstick without asking? And the reason I ask is because I know a person
Uh huh.
and their friend used their lipstick without permission, and they were horrified. It was like the biggest violation of your personal space that you could ever imagine.
Uh
And
huh.
at first I didn't understand the upsetness, but afterwards I was like, that is sort of a germy thing. But
Hmm.
like, I don't know what girls do in the bathroom when they go to the restaurant all together.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, is that a super gross thing, or is that something everybody does?
I don't think it's a gross thing. I think a lot of people do it. It's yeah. Some people are very sensitive about it. One of the things that is less frowned on a little bit more is using eye makeup because it's your eye and
Right. Your eye is more sensitive than your.
yeah.
Oh, oh gosh, there's a horrible joke to be made in there, but I'll leave that for a different podcast. Um, okay, so now I know a little bit more about makeup. Even the first thing was more than I ever needed to know, but now I know a little bit more. Maybe there's a business for celebrities selling their used makeup. Uh,
Yeah.
I can imagine it's like Cameo, like just like people will pay like $25 for somebody to make a small video. Maybe people will pay extra for someone's once used lipstick.
You'll get a lot of creepers on there.
Hey, the money is money.
Yep.
Yes. Okay. Back to fees. Just as creepy. So based on the last thing we said before that strange interlude that I take responsibility for, um, it sounds like there is a price point at
Hmm.
which it's worth it to turn on no returns.
Hmm.
So, if, for example, your penalty would be a certain price, and taking it back is going to be X value that you get penalized
Hmm.
against the price of goods, if they just throw it out, it might be worth it just to have people throw it out. And that could be, I imagine that with very inexpensive things, that will immediately become much more prevalent.
Hmm.
Is
Yeah.
that sound right?
Yeah, and consumables, that can't be reused.
Right.
Um,
Consumables, I imagine, have always been that case,
yeah.
because you literally just can't do anything with it.
Hmm.
The only reason to avoid that with consumables is if it gets around that you don't have to return things,
Yeah.
people will just ask for returns and get goods for free.
Yeah.
So that's the
Exactly.
only, like, if you know you never have to send it back, you'll just keep everything by saying you were going to send it back and not doing it.
Yeah.
Whereas if they
That's
think
true.
there's a chance you're going to send it back, okay. But at the same time, like I said, if people will figure out that there is a threshold, oh, nothing below $10 they ever tell you to send back, all
Hmm.
of a sudden people will start asking for returns on everything below $10.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, and that's a good point because I returned two products from the same brand. They both made my skin burn, so I won't name the brand, but it's a larger brand.
I
Uh,
would say it's super appropriate to name the brand.
okay, it's ELF.
Like,
It's not anyone's. It's like a big brand that you see in like Sephora. It's ELF.
in an interesting turn of the world, I know ELF very well
Oh
because
no.
um, I, how do I explain the relationship? I know somebody that lived down the block from the founders.
Oh, okay.
Randomly interesting and useless. The brand has already been sold, so the founders are not even involved anymore.
There you
Uh,
go.
but it's an interesting connection.
Yeah.
That's that said, yes, when something burns your skin, it should be said.
Yeah.
Uh, I will absolutely add the disclaimer that your skin is your own skin. and it might not burn anybody else's skin. So
Yeah.
it's not saying that it will burn everybody else's skin, but it's good to know that one person had this experience.
There you go. Yeah.
That's
I'm the anomaly. But
we're
yeah,
covering ourselves.
yeah. And so I returned both of them. One of them, they said, we don't need the return. The other one said, we do. So, you know,
They keep you on your toes.
they do, but that at least, says, okay, well, ELF, you can't go and you can't pillage their, their catalog for free.
Right.
So, because they do have a balance.
I wonder if one of those was a higher return rate than the other.
Mm.
I don't
That
know.
would be, one of them was a foundation. So it's color, when you get a foundation, if the color doesn't match, you're going to return it. So it's probably a higher return rate. And if you have a higher return rate, and that might even be a strategy, if you can track and see that you've got a high return rate, turn off the returns for a specific product, or even, if you're tracking it on a monthly basis, you can see, okay, well, I'm getting close to the threshold, turn it off. I mean, maybe that's kind of very, very, you got to be very diligent with that and maybe a little bit obsessive, but
I think so.
theoretically.
No. Okay. So this leads to the next question. Everything leads to the next question. But with this, there's something I am almost ashamed to admit, but I guess I have to admit it. I am not a user of SoStocked. Despite several offers, I have not found the time to do a demo yet.
Sure.
What exactly does SoStocked do? And how does that connect to you needing to live in the world of fees?
Yeah. So SoStocked, what it does, and we launched right at the end of 2019. So we kind of, we were right there. There was no software that really worked the way that it needed to work. So SoStocked.
Well, what problem were you trying to what problem did you create the software to address? What was the issue you were having?
Yeah, so I was running out of inventory, and then sometimes I was ordering too much and paying a bunch of storage fees. At this point, I had run out of inventory on my bestseller for an entire month, and then for an entire week. And I looked at my bottom line. I'm like, what the heck? Like, what happened? And so I went to find. At first I dove into spreadsheets, and I was like, this is taking forever. And then I went and looked at the different software, and it was a black box. You got here's your magic number. We're not going to tell you how we got it. We have smart people, and there actually was a website that said, we have, statisticians and and the smartest algorithms. And it's like, but I need to know where the numbers came from.
Right.
So that was kind of the premise. Was I kept asking around, asking my friends what they were using, and they all said, there's nothing out there that works right. We're using spreadsheets, and that's generally been
right,
than the answer. So that was what we were trying to solve. And so when we launched 25 people. We got a bunch of feedback. From that feedback, we ripped up the entire algorithm again. So we built it. They said, this is great, but I still want to go back and use my spreadsheets. And I said, okay, send me your spreadsheets. Let's get on a call. What works, what doesn't? And then we rebuilt it. And then we launched it again in 2020 more broadly. And $1 million sellers found out about it. They started testing it out. And then the floodgates kind of opened in that community, in the Titan network community. And then 2020, COVID hit, and there was nothing else. There was no one else talking about inventory. And everyone, all of a sudden, a subject that no one wanted to know about, all of a sudden, everybody wanted to know about.
Wait, so I know that COVID was completely insane in 1,000 ways.
Yep.
But I'm not sure how it's insane when it comes to inventory management. What changed during COVID?
Yep.
I know demand changed a bit but demand changed because people were A, buying more, and B, buying different things than the past. Obviously, certain things that you don't want to leave your house for, you were buying on Amazon, of course, and people were buying more of the same things. But that's sort of, the world is always changing like that. What changed because of COVID?
Yeah. So a lot of things. Supply chains got slower. So people had to forecast for, 90 to 120 days versus, 60 days.
Right.
And then the big thing that changed, people used to send direct to FBA. All of a sudden, you had the restock limits. So you couldn't do that. 3PLs started being a necessity for nearly everybody. So being able to, we were the first software and only software back then who forecasted using the restock limits. I learned restock limits policy. I was speaking on podcasts and webinars about restock limits. And so just the strategy of, if I have to place my order 20 days in advance versus 60 days in advance. I have to send it to this other location. I have to drip feed it into Amazon and make sure that I'm doing it in such a way that, my restock limits, how can I influence my restock limits? If I have a stock out here, slow sales there's all sorts of dynamics that influence that algorithm. So that was a lot of what we were focused on, is how to teach people to change the entire way that they forecast and that they work through their supply chain.
That's so interesting. I mean, I never, again, my buying and selling days were earlier than that, and I still remember the agony of having to place orders in May and June for goods that were going to sell in December, just for the holiday rush. And it was so crazy because we would take delivery in September and the invoices would be due in October, and we didn't sell a single piece yet from that projection. So this is definitely connected to that.
Yeah.
Out of curiosity, I don't even know that it's feasible, but does SoStock take into account, well, how extensive does it get? Is it just a production and restocking management and forecasting tool, or does it do other things?
So it does POs. You can create POs and warehouse we call them work orders, and track those. So track those based on your lead times, track your inventory in warehousing, and then it'll run a full forecast for an entire 12 months based on your settings. So you can use seasonality, you can use trends, you can put your marketing plans into your inventory plans so that you're ordering based on what you intend to sell.
Right. So if you want to grow 20% this year, matching last year's number is going to leave you short.
Yeah, exactly. So you can kind of go in and massage that. And then we have dashboards, so custom dashboards, which I guess is a huge thing. I was talking to a friend of mine who has been using the software since pretty much the beginning. And I was mentioning this new dashboard that we're going to be launching soon. And I said, and then we'll have the standard customizable dashboards. And he's like, that's not nothing. Like, customizable dashboards is everything. So we have customizable dashboards where you can.
Yeah, I was going to say, what's customizable in a dashboard?
Yeah. So we have about 100 data points, and you can pick which columns you want to show up and in what order. And then you can filter. So you can filter by all of these. So if you wanted to say, I only want to see products that are selling less than 20 units a day, or that are incurring aged inventory fees, or, that are going to stock out in the next, month. So you can filter these things, and then you can save the dashboards. We have default dashboards, of course, but you can save the dashboards based on the data that you want to see.
Right. So you can adjust which data points you want to see. You can adjust, I guess presets are an important thing, because when you set date ranges and other metrics, you want to save those instead of having them need to be set every time.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So and those are all good.
Yeah. And then as far as the fees are concerned, last year we added a dashboard and a widget for overstock fees. So aged inventory, and then any inventory that you have over 90 days. So we calculate overstock fees for an entire year. And And so there's that piece. And then we just released a dashboard for low inventory fees. So you can see what is incurring fees and what is about to incur fees in the next 2 weeks if you don't do something about it.
Okay. So is there a certain minimum size of seller that can take advantage of this, or is there a minimum amount of data you need for it to be effective? I imagine that the larger the seller, the easier it is to extract these things because you have more data about units, and month to month the numbers are steadier.
Mm-hmm.
And as a seller gets smaller, there is a point where when somebody is selling 3 units a month, there's not much of a projection you can do from month 1 to 2. When you go from 3 to 7 or 7 to 2 or some numbers like that,
Mm-hmm.
where in between is, I guess, the smallest size that somebody would be ideal for this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in terms of ideal, I would say the starting point is, low 7 figures. And then as you kind of scale up, start to be able to use more of the features. Generally below that, we do have people that use the software below that, but it's not as impactful. And as you're just starting out, something like using the inventory side of managed by stats, for example, is enough until the point where you add more ASINs, you add more marketplaces, you start having a 3PL. That's when you want to start looking at using a software.
So does SoStock take into account different warehouse locations with the work it does?
Yeah, not the different FBA warehouses. We just pull the FBA
No,
data.
but if you have some at your garage and some at a 3PL and some at another place and some on the boat, you can keep track of all of those and
Mhm.
manage them.
Yep. Yeah. We have warehouse levels. There's dashboards that we have, and then you also, in terms of the supply chain, you can see on a Kanban view what's in production, what is on a boat, what's checking into your warehouse, and that sort of thing.
Okay. Um, Besides the size of a business, is
Mhm.
there an ideal number of monthly units that it works well for?
Mhm.
And to say it a different way, or to give like an example, somebody could be doing $5 million a year, but
Mhm.
they have 25,000 SKUs and everything they just occasionally pull off of a shelf. Somebody else can be doing that same number with 3 products, and each
Mhm.
one is a superstar winner that each one sells $2 million a month.
Mhm.
Um, Somewhere in between is too few units to project.
Mhm.
Do you have any idea where that is, or not so much?
I mean, you can project, if it's selling like a unit a day, even you can project that. Um, we were able to project things where it's selling every couple of days. We just use, point, if it's point
Right.
zero or point two or whatever, then it's like, okay, this sells, every 4 days. So everything can be projected by the system. It's a matter of do you need it? If you have a high
Right.
amount of SKUs, even if it's low volume, low velocity, you generally will need something, because that's where, with wholesalers, a big piece of it is they have inventory that's aging. So when we work with wholesalers, they have aging inventory. That's where their business starts to fall apart because they don't have that visual on that.
I see that. I see that with the brands I work with a lot of times.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's something I actually didn't think of. So the reality is, you might a brand or a seller might not need it because they might not think that they need it because they're not selling a couple of hundred units a month, but still having information on what's running low and having information on that across many SKUs is its own different value. So it looks like that's where you'd plug in also.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And we're going to be, we're getting very close. We have the pieces we already have the low inventory dashboard, and we have the overstock dashboard, but we're getting ready to launch a program that adds more granularity to this, where you're given the data on, which one of those ASINs are your problems, how are they affecting your bottom line. So we're moving in the direction of not just being inventory, but being a profitability tool and a fee prevention tool. So that, because you've got sellers that have their own systems,
Right.
sellers, 8-figure sellers, they start getting up and they have their inventory piece. But, I had a 9-figure seller we were talking about, so stocked and talking about inventory and all that. And one of the things he said is, he said, do you know any software that will look at, if I've got aged inventory and I've got, removal fees, like, how do I know what
It's
to
worth
do?
it.
And so, I'm like, I'll get back to you on that, So,
Right. All right. Yeah. Add it to the development list.
yeah.
Are you using AI in any way with the software? Are you taking advantage of the wave of AI?
So inside of the software, no, but there are other ways.
You're not supposed to say that. You're supposed to explain that AI is powering everything, I think, these days.
Yeah. Um, as far as I know, I mean, maybe, I don't do the development under the hood thing. So,
Right.
It could be that we are, but
Right.
it's been helpful for me in terms of taking my concepts and how do these, how can we take the ideas of what I want to do and get them into a form that actually can be translated into, development. So there are
Yeah.
other ways to leverage AI to get to that point. But a lot of the things that we're building now are Amazon policy related. So the math, as long as you parse the data, the math can be understood. And AI has not been very good at math, strangely enough.
Yeah.
Chat GPT, it can't do projections. It can give you, XYZ, but if I said, give me something where the rate is changing like this over the series of 8 months, it can't do that. So it's not at that point. So, I sit down, figure that out, and, do all the painstaking hard work and then give it to the development team. And they can do that better than if we were to sit and try to ask AI to figure it out.
Yeah, it's almost you would be asking AI to do something it doesn't necessarily do.
Yeah.
Not
yet.
not yet. Does I know that you're part of the Carbon 6 family,
Mm-hmm.
and Carbon 6 has a bunch of other tools that do complementary things.
Yep.
Does SoStock like directly connect with any of those other softwares? Is there any direct relationship or feeding of information between one and the other, or is it still doing its own thing for now?
So we don't connect with others. We do have a profit audit where we are able to, if you connect with all the different APIs, we can run a profit audit, which is the objective is, find all the places where your business is losing money. Where it's at when you have your own API, and SoStock has our own API, you can't share data. So that's, as long as we have our own API, we can't share data with, let's say PixelMe or Seller Investigators. That's just kind of one of the guidelines of Amazon at this
Right.
point.
So there isn't one main API that the whole enterprise gets.
Mhm.
Each tool has its own pipelines of data, and those are meant to be kept to each tool, it sounds like.
Yeah, that's how I mean, I can't speak to everything, but that's how SoStocked is currently runs. But the synergy with them, we can, if someone comes, in and starts talking about, SoStocked, well, maybe they've got a bunch of inventory that they need to move that inventory. That's something that the other tools can help with. PPC Entourage can help with the advertising. PixelMe can help with external ads. So there are ways that they fit together. Seller Investigators helps with lost inventory. So it kind of ties in. There's a lot of ways that it can tie in where we can help sellers with a bunch of different things because we're having those conversations. So the conversations aren't in a vacuum. So in terms of how the tools fit together, it's just, we are having that conversation and it kind of lends to being more of a problem solver than, a tool seller.
Right. And I find that also it's funny because that's actually it's something which is underrated in its importance. So
Hmm.
when people ask me what I do, I like to say that I do PPC plus.
Hmm.
So some PPC agencies stick strictly to ads, and that's the end, that's the beginning and end, like that,
Hmm.
very narrow.
Yeah.
There is a reality in which a lot of things connect to having ads run well.
Yeah.
And because we are able to help brands with all the pieces, that absolutely helps one part work better. So
Hmm.
if somebody needs help with a listing, we can absolutely optimize their listing internally, or we have relationships with people that can help them get that done. If
Yeah.
somebody needs a certain tool or they need to be able to do a certain thing that's slightly outside the ads, we know all the people and make all the connections.
Hmm.
And that helps us be more in tune with our brands.
Yeah.
And that leads to better performance for the brand. So I imagine that's something similar that happens with you. So
Hmm.
basically, once you're very closely in tune with a brand and their production life and
Hmm.
with all of those aspects, it definitely connects to the other parts of running their business. And now
Yeah.
you're connected to the things which can help them run their business, it sounds like.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
All right. Is there anything else the world should know about so stock that I didn't touch on?
Um.
This is my thank you for giving me 2 hours and 32 seconds of your time. You have your spotlight now for anything you want to show off to the world.
Yeah. So I would say we have two things that we that are beneficial. We have free tools that help with analyzing your product resizing. If you have an opportunity to get into a lower FBA fee tier, we have a free tool for that on sostock.com/tools. And there's also a carton optimizer. So those are just some ways to, if you can't avoid the inbound fees, maybe you can offset them, with these other fees.
Right.
Uh, and then the last thing, the last piece is we have a profit audit. So if someone's curious, what am I, stock outs historically, how have they financially impacted my business? Do I have aged inventory fees that are going to cost me? And then the last piece of that is we'll run your entire catalog in bulk for resizer opportunities.
How does a resizer opportunity work? Is it
Yeah.
something where you look at all the sizes of a product and you say, oh, this product is within 2% of the next lower size, and you say, hey, if you can shave off an eighth of an inch here, all of a sudden you pay much less fees? Is that sort of how it works, or is
Yep.
there something else to it?
So we'll run the entire catalog. We'll say this is the size tier that you fall under, and we want you want to be in the next size tier. We found an opportunity where if you shave off this much, then you'll get in that lower tier. This is the unit per unit savings. We'll look at the entire year and we'll say, based on your sales for the year, this is how much an annual savings you would make. And we
Right.
do it that way so that it's, if you have an opportunity, but it's going to save you $1,000, you don't want to spend that time as urgently as if it's going to save you $20,000.
Right. Right. So you might be able to save $2 a piece, but if you only sell 10 units a year, that's not worth making a whole new box size.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if this is a winner of a product, every eighth of an inch and every 30 cents is a new Mercedes, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that it'll basically evaluate. I guess the tool will say not only where the sizing opportunity is, but it'll do the math based on what you actually sell of the product to tell
Mm-hmm.
you whether it's worth it or not.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And sometimes it's just requesting a remeasure. If it's that close, Amazon maybe bumped you up into the higher tier. You request a remeasure on Amazon, and they may put you back in the lower tier. So
Okay,
there's also that opportunity.
got it. So what's the other tool?
So that piece, the profit audit, and that includes that profit audit. So If you wanted to do that, you can go to carbon6.io/profit audit. And then the other free tool that we have on that tools page that I mentioned is carton optimization, or carton pallet optimization. So it looks at the size of your product and the size and the pallet dimensions, and then it'll reverse engineer it so that you have as many units per carton as possible and as many cartons per pallet as possible. So that, it may be that you had 8 units per carton, and now we say you can have 12 units per carton. But it's not just looking at that. It's looking at, how many cartons can I get on the pallet? How can I use as much space on the pallet? So we've had people where they're only using 60% of the pallet volume. And that's a significant change. If you're paying per pallet fees, you're paying, per carton fees.
So this is like a Tetris for 18-wheelers.
Yeah. The Tetris for pallets. And the whole idea is, again, reducing your per unit costs so that when you've got these other fees, you can either avoid fees or you can offset fees.
Right. Will that tool do things on a per shipment basis? Like if you give it a mixed amount of units and all different sizes, will it play the sizing game, or is it really just designed for one product with a certain size to be rearranged?
Yeah. So right now it's just designed for case pack.
Got it. All right. Something to add to the roadmap.
Yeah.
I mean, that it definitely, I would imagine that it's not as small of a thing as I described, because of course the geometry goes off the charts as soon as you bring in multiple sizes. But at the same time, for someone to be able to extract those values with mixed pallets of goods or mixed SKUs in a truckload, it definitely has some value there.
Mm-hmm.
I think people would be interested in it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Wow. We covered a lot. I hope I was not too draining. There was a point where I was noticing that we have been speaking for a while, and I know that I was asking a ton of questions. And at some point I said, oh my God, maybe I'm like being too tough on you, or maybe I'm draining you, or maybe I'm but I feel like you were in your zone with all the stuff we were talking about.
Yeah, I like talking about this stuff. It's hard to get people to listen, but there's so much nuance, and I really like sharing it because there are so many strategies. I like coming up with strategies. Someone has a problem, you come up with a strategy that could only be found by knowing the policies and the programs and how they all fit together. And unless you know all of that, you don't know what your options are.
Right.
So that's the joy that I take in knowing these fees, is that I see them, because I'm kind of not as affected by them. I see them as opportunities. Where do the opportunities lie? Whereas a lot of people just see them as barriers. You search for the opportunity within the barrier, and how can I get one over on my competitors by knowing what strategies to take.
Oh yeah, listen, you don't have to sell me on that. Strategy is part of my company's name. So I absolutely love looking at scenarios. I absolutely love hearing about challenges and trying to figure out the little space where we can find a crack to open up, you know, and those are our opportunities. Those are what make every day interesting. Hearing new things, hearing the same thing for the 5th time and realizing that there might be something worth digging into, all of that stuff, like really, I get enthusiastic, just like you've been enthusiastic when we spoke about the inventory reports. Okay, so let's do 2 things. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to run through the couple of questions that we got in the chat, and then we'll do maybe some wrapping up.
Cool. Sounds good.
So question number 1 from Muhammad. Abe, are you currently using AMC for your Amazon advertising clients? The short answer is no. The longer answer is a little bit. The reason it's a little bit is because realistically, in order to take advantage of AMC, you need a good body of data. A bunch of the questions I asked you, Chelsea, are about how big somebody should be in order to take advantage of software. And you also know that in a lot of scenarios, if there isn't enough information, all the information you get is noise. So realistically, with across my many clients and all my categories, there aren't enough large SKUs that would make it actionable with the data I get. I could apply AMC across every account and I would get data and it would look super interesting all day, but the amount of things I could do with it would be super limited. So it would be just interesting things to discuss. Now, interesting things to discuss are absolutely interesting things to discuss, but when it comes to what I do on Tuesday morning and what I do on Wednesday morning and what I do on every single day of the month, when it comes to an account, I need to prioritize the actionable information, and AMC is not giving me enough for most SKUs. I do have a couple of clients who it is worth it, and we dig into it there, but I wouldn't call myself an expert realistically. So that's the hedged answer for that question. The next question is also from Mohammed, which is, can you please repeat the name of that price velocity software? So the software is called AZ Seller Kit. A like Amazon, Z like Zebra, Seller KIT. It's I know specifically the founders of the software, Lenny and Jason, are fantastic guys. They're very smart, and they also have their own business. So they apply the things they need in running their business into the software. I'll put in a link maybe in the comments once this video goes live in case you're still not here. But it's called AZ Seller Kit. If you message them, you can mention Jason's name and tell him I sent you over there. And he'll either treat you well or badly, depending on how much I've annoyed him lately. But ideally, he'll treat you well. And the last comment that we have is from someone named Ari Cohen. Someone named Ari Cohen. Haha. Summary: run your business better than you've been doing and do the things you should have been doing the whole time. Good interview, very informative. Well, I will take that on its face value and I will appreciate the feedback. Yeah, listen, I think that this has been an amazing interview. We at the beginning we spoke about like doing a deep dive and talking about a lot of detail, and I think we absolutely have done it. One of my pet peeves is an interview in which somebody is reading questions off of a list, and almost no matter what your answer is, the next thing is going to be the next question on his list. We did not do that at all. Everything from why you love inventory reports and going sideways with other things, whatever. Yes, the makeup also. But it definitely made the conversation more interesting. It took a subject which is dry for many, not for you, I understand, but for many. And we dug into it with enough detail that people can figure out the ways to tighten up their businesses. So I really appreciate it. I think the other part of wrapping up is maybe, of course, I know who you are, but maybe leave us with the ways to contact you, the ways to start digging into SoStocked.
Yeah. So sostocked.com/connect. You'll get a link to the tools there. And then, we've got a link to SoStock, the demos, my social media, and ways to contact me. And then if you're interested in the audit, the audit is at carbon6.io/profit audit. And then I mentioned my workshop that I did is at carbon6.io/fee stack.
So the workshop was specifically talking about fees in a lot of detail?
Yeah. So we have a white paper, and then Vanessa and I did 2 workshops. One goes deep dive into what the fees, how they work. And then the workshop goes into how do you take the fees and put them into practice. So I do a lot of talking about that report and how to read the report and what the data means and how to use the data to reduce your fees.
It's amazing. All right, cool. All right, let's do one last thing. I need to take a picture. So I'll ask you for a bright, shiny smile, and we'll get it. We'll make it official.
Sounds great.
Let me move this aside. All right, perfect.
Cool.
One more for posterity. There we go. Okay, so everybody, I appreciate everyone who has joined us, who has listened to us, and for everybody who listens to it later, I appreciate you even more.
Mhm.
Hopefully, we'll do more of these. Hopefully, we'll have Chelsea back the next time Amazon gives us an onslaught of things that need really, really
Mhm.
detailed breaking down. And Chelsea, maybe you'll join us anyway for other things also.
Absolutely.
All right, guys. Thanks so much. See you all soon.
Awesome. Thanks.